This is Ford's take on the Nissan Juke. It's called the EcoSport and it's based on the Fiesta. Now, because of the One Ford global strategy, it's actually been designed and developed in Brazil and it's built for Europe in a factory in Chennai in India. It's only available in front-wheel drive, but Ford say that with 200mm of ground clearance and a wading depth of 550mm, it should be decent off-road. However, as the majority of people are going to be using it in town, we'll be testing it exclusively on the road here in Spain to find out if it's any good.
Although the EcoSport definitely looks awkward from some angles, I was actually surprised by how well the front end looks work on the road. The exterior design isn't quite as unusual as the Nissan Juke, or as personalisable as it is on the Renault Captur, two keen rivals, but there is plenty to like. The angular headlights come with LED daytime running strips as standard, and the 16-inch alloys are also standard, and the silver roof rails too. But at the back, things do start to take a turn for the worse.
The front end styling is a nice mixture between the Fiesta and the Ford Edge concept, which is going to be coming to Europe in 2015. But here at the back you get the first signs that this EcoSport wasn't originally destined for Europe. There's this big spare wheel well on the back. It kind of ruins the rear end styling and it's a bit like the first generation Toyota RAV4. It also adds 0.2 meters to the overall length, and as I'm about to show you, if you're parked in a tight parallel space or in a multi-story, then you better make sure you don't reverse, because this huge swinging rear door is going to be very difficult to open in that sort of space, and it's going to make it hard to access the 330-litre boot. Not ideal for city customers, which is a shame, because Ford reckon that's what the majority of buyers are going to use this car for. As with most modern Fords, you'll be pleased to know that the EcoSport drives extremely well. That's because it shares most of its mechanicals underneath with the Fiesta. So you get a nice front-wheel drive chassis, a very slick 5-speed manual gearbox, really weighty steering, and when you do turn into a corner, although there's a bit more body roll than you might get with a hatchback, there's loads of grip, hangs on really tenaciously, and the balance is very neutral, which is great, and it's much better in that regard than, say, the Vauxhall Mokka or the Nissan Juke, which it competes with. The engine range is quite narrow, so it starts with a 1.5 litre petrol engine with 110 brake horsepower and tops out with a 1.5 litre diesel engine, and that's just got 90 brake horsepower but a bit more torque. But the car we're driving here is the 1 litre EcoBoost. It's the award-winning 3-cylinder turbo engine that comes with 123 brake horsepower, about 170 newton-meters of torque. It's the nippiest car in the EcoSport range, so it does 0 to 62 miles an hour in about 12.7 seconds, and I have to say it's pretty entertaining to drive. It won't be to everyone's tastes. It reminds me a bit of the Fiat Panda 4x4 Twin Air. So at low speeds around town, it's actually quite refined, but if you drop a gear and accelerate and on the motorway, you get this noisy offbeat warble, and in fact in the EcoSport you get some of that noise and vibration coming through the footwell and also the steering wheel and the gear lever. So some people will find it a bit rough around the edges, I have to be honest, but for me I find it quite entertaining. The diesel's a little bit quieter and a bit more economical. This EcoSport claims to return about 53.3 mpg and emits 125 grams per kilometre of CO2, which isn't bad, but most of the competition do cleaner vehicles. In particular the Peugeot 2008 and the Renault Captur, which both managed to go below 100 grams per kilometre. So it depends what you're looking for, but I have to say it's quite well priced. The entry-level petrol, that starts at about $14,995, and this EcoBoost in titanium trim with lots of kit, well, that's $15,995. So it puts it around or on a par with most of its major rivals in terms of price. The car we are driving here had to be shipped all the way from India, so it's actually a pre-production prototype, which means we don't get a totally finished interior. Having said that, it'll be completely familiar to anyone who's sat in a Fiesta before, with a mobile phone style centre console with a fair amount of buttons and similar plastics. That is kind of a mixed bag really. It means that the major touch points like the gear lever and the steering wheel are really nice, feel robust and solidly built. But as you could probably hear, there's plenty of hard and scratchy plastics in here, and you could probably play sort of a drum solo by touching all these different surfaces. They don't match up that well, and I have to say they don't give a particularly good impression of perceived build quality. Maybe that'll change with the finished cars, but at the moment this feels a little bit of a step behind cars like the Peugeot 2008, certainly, and to some extent the Renault Captur as well. Space in here is really generous though, and for a compact car you could easily fit 4 6-foot adults in complete comfort, which you can't say about the Fiesta. Getting 3 across the back might be a bit of a squeeze though, and there's not a huge amount of flexibility when it comes to swapping the seats around. You can't slide the rear bench back and forwards, for instance. Having said that though, the headroom is really decent, and the only thing you will notice is that it's quite narrow up here, so you feel quite close to your passenger. But other than that, practicality is certainly on the side of the EcoSport. So, does the new EcoSport have what it takes to be a real cash cow for Ford? Well, to give you some idea, the brand plans to sell around 1 million SUVs over the next 6 years, and this car is a key part of that strategy. There are some sacrifices to be made having a car developed in South America, and the interior, although this is a pre-production prototype, does not quite meet the same standards as some of its European rivals. But the sharper driving dynamics do give it a real USP in this crowded market. However, the old-fashioned looks and some of the interior trim do let it down slightly, and it ultimately feels like a talented also-ran rather than a real class leader, which is a bit of a shame. Having said that, I have no doubt that Ford will sell every one of the 4,000 cars it has planned for next year, and probably more in years to come.